How to measure with the ruler. First thing you need to know is where is the zero mark? And the zero mark is always located at 0. On this second ruler, the zero mark is at the left edge. On some rulers, you might think it's at the edge, but it's a little bit into it. Sometimes they don't even put the 0 there. That's important because when you start to measure an object, you always have to measure it from the 0 mark. So over here in the second ruler, that's okay. But in the first rule, if you start measuring from the edge, that's incorrect because the 0 mark starts here. So always start from the 0 mark when measuring. A student says the screwdriver is 4 inches long. How would you explain to the student that this is not correct? So here the student believed that you would start at the 1 inch mark. That actually makes it 1 inch longer than it really is. So it's not 4 inches long. You have to remind the student that you have to start at the 0 mark for that ruler. So this screwdriver is actually 3 inches long. Can you still measure with the broken ruler below? Sure you can. Normally we would start at the 0 mark, but it broke off. So we'll start at the 1 mark instead. Now that makes it 1 inch too long. Over here it shows that it's 4 inches long. But since we knew we measured from the 1, we just have to subtract 1 inch off, and that gives us 3. So we know that it's 3 inches long. So we just compensate. Here I have two pictures of the same ruler. One is upside down. In a word problem, you might be asked to measure in inches or in centimeters. So you have to make sure you identify the correct side to use. And all you usually have to do is look for the word, and here it is here. And so that would be in inches, and cm is for centimeters. Sometimes it's not clearly labeled, and I'm going to show you how to figure it out in the next few pages. Here are 3 common ruler sizes: 8ths, 16ths, and centimeters. The most common in the US is 16ths. Let's see how you can figure out which is which. If it's not clearly labeled, how do you figure out which type of ruler you have? You go by spaces. Let's zoom in to make this easier to see. The type of ruler you have depends on the number of spaces between the two whole numbers. So we're going to start here. This is your first mark. Not here, that's 0. So you always start right after the whole number. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that starts the next whole number. So there are 8 spaces between this. So then we call this an 1/8 ruler in inches. Let's say you have an object that ends at the third mark. Is that third mark equal to 0.3? Let's see what happens. So here I have 1 and the third mark. So sometimes I'll see someone write 1.3 is the answer, but that's incorrect, and you have to remember why. 1.3 means 1 and 3/10. Why tenths? Because the 3 is in the tens column. But that only works when there are 10 spaces or 10 subdivisions. But we just found out there are 8 spaces, so this doesn't make sense. So that's absolutely wrong. Don't do that. So what you really have to do is just leave it as a fraction. 1 and 3, and what's the denominator? It's the number of spaces in the ruler, which in this case is 8. So the answer is 1 3/8 of an inch. Now if you did want to convert this to a decimal, if you had to, you would do long division. And here's the work here so you can quickly see it. You would get 0.375. But no one does that. If you're going to use an 1/8 rule in inches, leave it as a fraction. That's better. I have 3 objects I need to measure, 3 rectangles, and I need to find out the length of each one. I'm going to take my first rectangle and line it up with the 0 mark. I'm going to see where it ends, and I'm going to say it right there. I'm going to put the rectangle back, and I know that it's at least 1 inch long. And now I'm going to count the marks: 1, 2, and 3. And what is the denominator? It's the number of spaces or subdivisions between the two whole numbers. And I know this is an 1/8 ruler, so I'm going to write 8. So the answer is 1 3/8. Let's do the next rectangle. I'll line up with the 0 mark. And right here, take my arrow and put it right there. Let's put that back down. I know it's at least 1 inch long, so I'm going to write that right away before I forget. I know I have a fraction. And now what I'm going to do is I have to count the marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait a minute. It's between 4 and 5. It doesn't land on the mark perfectly. But which mark is it closer to, the 4 or the 5? It's closer to the 5. So even though the answer is not exactly 5/8, that's what we put, because that's closest to 5/8. So the answer is 1 5/8. Let's do the next one. Line it up with the 0 mark. Here's the arrow right about there. Put it back. All right, I know it's at least 1 inch long. I know this is an 1/8 ruler, so I'll put the 8 down there, and it's in inches, and I have to count the marks. Now remember, you're not counting here as the first mark, not at the whole number. It's the first one after the whole number. So 1, 2, and 3. It's between 2 and 3, but I'm not sure which one it's closer to. It looks like it's about halfway. When it's a halfway about, we usually round to the next higher mark. So that's going to be 3. So the answer is 1 3/8 of an inch long. So again, it's not an exact answer. If you need to be more precise, then we use a ruler that's subdivided into more spaces, like a 16th ruler, which is on the next page. Again, how do we know what kind of ruler we have? We count the spaces or the subdivisions. Let's zoom in to make this easier to see. I would count the number of spaces. Now remember, you don't start at the whole number, you start at the first mark after. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there are 16 spaces between the two whole numbers, and the 16th space starts the next whole number. So we know that this must be a 16-inch ruler. Now the next thing you have to be careful again is that question. Is the third mark equal to 0.3? So let's say I put it right here at the third mark. Some students again will think that that's 0.3, but that's not correct because that means 3 out of 10. And we know that we have 16 spaces, so that's wrong. So we would write that just as 3/16 of an inch. Now, if you wanted to change this into a decimal, no one does, but if you wanted to do that, this is what it would be. You would do the long division, and you would get 0.1875. I'll write that down. 0.1875 of an inch. So that's what you would do to get that answer. Everyone leaves it as 3/16 of an inch. So let's measure these two rectangles. I'm going to put this one over here. Put the arrow there. Put it back down. So I know it's at least an inch long. And now I'm counting the marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6. But it's not out of eighths this time. Since it's a 16-inch ruler, you have to put it over 16. And this time I can simplify it. So I'm going to, and you always should. So you can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. So I know that this rectangle is 1 3/8 of an inch long. All right, let's check the next one. Make sure I line up with the 0 mark. Take my little arrow to put it there. Okay, let's put this back down. I know it's at least an inch long, and I'm going to count the marks now. So I know that it's 16 spaces, and you see this big halfway line? That lets you know that that's the 8 spaces mark. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm not going to count all the spaces. I'm going to start from here. That's 8, so that's 9, and that's 10. So I know it's 10 out of 16 spaces, and I can simplify that also. I can divide both by 2. So I get 1 5/8 of an inch long. And that's how you measure using a 16th ruler. Here's the last ruler. Let's find out what kind of ruler this is. Let's zoom in on it again to make it easier to see. And let's count the spaces. So remember, it's the first mark after the 0 mark. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So there are 10 spaces, which makes it a centimeter ruler. So it's definitely measured in centimeters. And by the way, one of these little spacers is the same as what's called a millimeter. So 10 millimeters makes 1 centimeter. I took out the zoomed ruler, and now I have my arrow at the third mark. Now, is that equal to 1.3? Is the third mark 0.3? Let's see. Well, 0.3 means 3 out of 10. And you might say, no, it's not. But it is actually this time because there are 10 spaces. So the answer can be written as 0.3 or 3/10. It doesn't matter which one. But because this is the metric system, we love decimals. They're easier to work with. So I'm not going to write the fraction because it's inconvenient. So 0.3 is the best way to write this answer. So let's measure the two rectangles. This time the 0 mark is at the left edge of the ruler. Put it right there. Put that arrow there to see it. All right. Now we know it's after the number 3, so it's not after 1 this time. So it's 3, and I can write a decimal point because it's out of tenths. I know the halfway mark is the 5th mark, so I don't have to always count from the first, and that's at the 6th mark. So I can write 3.6 centimeters. Let's do the next one. Again, put it at the 0 mark, which in this case is this one. Put this right here. Take it away. I'm going to lower it a little bit so I can see it. This one's an easy one. Again, it's after 3, and it's at the halfway mark, so it's 3.5 centimeters. I hope this video has helped you in understanding the differences between the different types of rulers and how to count the marks.